We had an actor called Javed Jafri on the show a few years ago, and he was the first person who mentioned jinns on the show. And since then, it's been one of those topics that's been in my heart in terms of something I wish to talk about on an episode. This is that episode. So I would love to know right from the basics, in terms of the Quran, what is said about jinns and what are they? Imagine someone's hearing that word for the first time.
Yeah. So etymologically, the word itself, the root of it it refers to something in the Arabic, to something that's hidden or that's not seen. So it's a part of the hidden realm, the unseen realm. Now, obviously, if you look at this, what we're discussing right now from the perspective of modernity or a secular perspective, the unseen world doesn't exist, right? It's all the seen, the physical, the material. But I think people have grown beyond this now. So these topics are very interesting to people. So from an Islamic perspective, this is referring to the unseen. It's a part of the unseen. So the jinn are beings within Islam that are creation of God. God created them. God created them before he created the human beings, us humans. And they occupied the world. So the jinn have been there. They were created before us. They were created from a different substance than us. So in the Quran, now obviously some of these things need to be interpreted. God refers to the humans as being created from clay, a clay-like substance. The angels were created from light. Now the angels are also these, non-physical, you can say supernatural beings.
Farishte?
Farishte in Urdu, or in Hindi, that's the word that would be used. The angels of God, basically.
In Arabic, what's it called?
Angels, malaika. Malaika.
Malaika.
Yeah, malaika, wow. the Arabic word itself. So they're the angels. Now the angels don't have free will. They are completely obedient to God. They obey the commands of God. Then God also created the jinn, right? Now the jinn were created in the Quran, it refers to as from a type of smokeless fire that's used in the Arabic. Now this many have interpreted in different ways, but it's a different substance. If you look at it from a sort of modern scientific perspective, some speculated that this may be referring to plasma, for example, the fourth state of matter. I incline towards that understanding, but again, it's speculation at the end of the day. So they're created from the smokeless fire, and humans were created from a clay-like substance, from the earth, essentially. So as humans, we have the physical selves, this material body, and then there's the soul within the human being. As God says, he created our souls and instilled the souls within this physical body. But the jinns, they were created from this smokeless type of fire. They were created, they were occupied the earth, but they started to create a lot of corruption and bloodshed and drama and facade and so on. There was one amongst the jinn who was named Iblis. In the Quran, we hear of him. Now, this figure, I don't know if you've heard of him before. So Iblis, most people, if I say the other name he's known by, you'll recognize him, Shaytan.
Gotcha.
In English, Satan. Right? But his original name wasn't Shaytan. His original name was Iblis. He was a jinn. But he was a jinn that he started to worship God and became a devout, obedient worshiper of God. And by the way, the jinn, just like humans, have free will. So they were created with free will as well, like us. So he would worship God, and he rose in rank because he would worship God, and he became very obedient to God to the degree where he got to the level of the angels. So he'd worship God amongst the angels. And then God decided to create insan in the Arabic, which is the human, right? Which is us human beings. So God created Adam, or Adam as he's known, right? The first human being. Now, again, the narratives, if I'm just stringing all the different sources for
Take your
us
time,
here.
bro.
Yeah.
Enjoying just being in your presence.
Okay, so I'm going to string all the sources together, because when I refer to these things, there's different sources I'm referencing. So the Quran, the Hadith literature, the tafsir or the exegesis of the Quran, etc. But I'm bringing you all together to paint this sort of cohesive image for us that's easy to understand. So God creates Adam, his physical being, and the narratives tell us that Shaytan or Iblis at the time saw that God created this being and started to become jealous, right? He didn't like this being. He would travel through the body of Adam and realize he was hollow, internally empty, meaning the physical being of Adam. And then God at one point decided to breathe the soul that God created into the human being, right? Which brought Adam to life. Now, when he was brought to life, the Quranic narrative, when we read the second chapter of the Quran, God tells us that he taught Adam the names of all things. Now, what these things are, again, scholars have given a lot of thought to this and exegesis on this. Some say is the name of all created things. Or some say it was knowledge that God gave Adam, which made Adam superior to all these other beings. So God taught him the names of things. And when God announced to the angels that he's creating this being, the angels, God records them as saying in the Quran, they ask God, are you going to create a being that's going to cause corruption and bloodshed on the earth? Now the scholars ask, well, why did the angels assume this? And some say it was because they saw what the jinn were doing on the earth, the corruption and the bloodshed. So they assumed that these beings, this new being also with free will is going to do the same thing, right? Because when you have free will, you can choose to do good, you can choose to do bad, right? If you go down the bad route, there's going to be bloodshed and corruption, right? And this is evident from our own history, the history of the world. So the angels asked, and God says, I know what you do not know, to the angels. So then God teaches Adam the names of things. Then he brings Adam in front of the angels and he says, tell them the names of all these things. Adam does this. He displays this ability God has given him. And then God asks the angels, including Iblis, Iblis is in that gathering now, this jinn, to bow down into prostration in front of Adam. Now this prostration was out of respect, not out of worship. Because in Islam, the concept of Tawheed, or oneness of God, is very clear. That the human being was created to worship God alone. Not to bow down to anything or anyone else. Just worship God, the one that made you directly. So God tells the angels to bow down to Adam out of respect. All of the angels immediately bow down because they obey the commands of God. But Iblis doesn't. He refuses. And then God asks him, he says, well, why didn't you bow down to Adam? And he said, I am better than him. And then he reasons with God. So you can say he was the first sort of pseudo-rationalist in history who argued with God, right? And he said, no, I am better than him. I am made of fire. He is made of clay. So this was his rationalization. But God is all-knowing. And what Iblis didn't understand, that God has done, there's wisdom behind why God created this being and why he asked. But his arrogance and his jealousy prevented him from bowing down to Adam. And this now sets the sort of scene, the historical scene for this battle between good and evil that we find in history. That Iblis says, no, I'm not going to bow down to him. And then God says to him, admonishes him. But he says, God asks God to give him time till the day of judgment. So God answers this request. He says, fine, you got time till the day of judgment. And he says, I will try to mislead this being that you've created. I will try to affect him and take him off the straight path, right? So this animosity and this hatred, this dynamic, the scene is set now. So Shaytan, he became Shaytan at this point. Because Shaytan is the evil one, the accursed one. That's what the word means in Arabic. The one that's cursed by God. So his objective was set. His objective now to the day of judgment was to misguide human beings and affect human beings. This is the sort of foundation of the story, right? The dynamic between man and jinn, right? Now, if you look at the Quran, the jinn are mentioned constantly throughout the Quran.
Really?
Yeah, throughout the Quran. So in the second chapter of the Quran, most of the story that I've mentioned to you is there. Then you have Surah Jinn, which is a specific chapter of the Quran named after the jinn. It's called, the surah or the chapter. Chapter isn't the right word for surah. Surah is a part of the Quran, but you can say chapter in English. That's called the jinn.
But okay, so bro, I understood the origin stories of Shaitan.
Mm-hmm.
Am I supposed to look at Shaitan as the leader of the jinn?
You can say that, yes.
Okay.
Right. So he was maybe not the first, but you can say he's the leader of the jinn, the evil jinn, especially, because Shaitan is the evil amongst the jinn. Now, amongst the jinn, there are good jinn and there are evil jinn. Just like amongst humans, there are good humans and there are evil humans. So that's why in the Quran, it's what's interesting, the word Shaitan is used for humans and for the jinn sometimes. Right? So it's not exclusive for the jinn.
Gotcha.
And many people have this misconception, but in the Quran, God refers to some humans as shayateen and some jinn as shayateen as well.
Gotcha.